Hello and welcome to another episode of Zion's Finest. Not just another episode, but this is episode 100, which is episode 109 or something. But this is episode 100 is what we're calling this. I am JK. I'm going to be hosting your radio dial here. I am joined by this lovely group. First and foremost, Nova winner Sam Sweeten.
Hey, hey.
Multiple GT winner Scott.
Hello.
And recent Utah Cup winner Matt.
Hello, hello.
See, look at that winner. And me. I recently watched K-pop Demon Hunters, and so I feel like a winner. Today, we're going to do our final tier of supports. We have done primaries. We have done secondaries. Supports are such a big thing right now. We are really interested to see where we're all going to go, and we're going to rock and roll on this. We're going to go faster. That's our goal, is under 4 hours. I think we'll make it. First and foremost, we are also just appreciative of you all joining us. Rate and review, join the Slack. We've had a bunch of people join over the last week, from winners of handful of GTs, from high competitors. The meta is crazy right now, and there's a ton of discussion. Get in here, talk about it, learn, and tell us why we're wrong, and then we will ignore you. But let's kick this off. We're going to go in order of what you see on the screen. And so first and foremost, I believe we have the 212th, which is a Matt Richards special.
Yeah, 212 really were one of the big winners of the recent patch. So they previously were one of the worst 4-cost supports in the game at 8 health with a fairly consistent attack. They're pretty solid now. Generally speaking, what they're going to do is, if they're just making an attack, they're going to shove consistently on both attacks. And they have 8 health, and that's enough to be a pretty good support just across the board. They also have the additional upside where they have some mobility, and if they focus or if they have help from other things, they can spike pretty hard. I don't think they are premier level support, but they are one of the first, if not the first, like 4-cost support that you look for when you're in Republic. I put them at high B, but I'm happy to hear your quibbles or disagreements.
I think it works. I think that if they had access to focus outside of having to take an action, they'd be an A-tier unit.
I think they still have a bit of a niche where they don't just go everywhere, but they're never a terrible activation. I think B is really a perfect tier for them. I do think by the end of this, we'll probably see a bunch of C supports, but 212th as a solid B tier support is just a great little spot for them. And comparative to, I think last year they were a D tier unit. They were awfully awful, and they're formidable. They do cool things. That little stunted tree is fun, and that's the 212th.
One other thing I want to throw in is that I think one of the things holding them back from being a little bit higher is that they are in a faction that often wants to spend actions on the take conquer or take cover action, and also they want to spend actions on a focus, and also they want to move, and also they want to attack. And so they often are making tough choices about how to spend those 2 actions per turn. They don't have the smooth economy that some other supports have.
It's interesting. I do think that there is, especially with supports, the less brain power that you have to use for them, even though they can all make explosive plays, is always a plus. And yeah, 212th has options, plethora of options. And another figure that has fun little options, we're going to move on to the fifth brother. Fifth brother I have as a Sam discussion. Sam, tell me your thoughts on fifth brother.
I think that fifth brother is excellent. I think he is the third best support in the game, which either puts him at the very top place in A tier for me or the very bottom of S. I have him the top of A, but I could be persuaded to bump him up if that's where other people want him. Yeah, that's interesting, Sam, because I have him at the bottom of A tier because I think that fifth brother's stock has gone down as other supports come in. I think him being a single unit, we're seeing more stuff with tiebreakers that is just, the more we see with tiebreakers, the further down the tiebreaker stock will go overall, just simple supply and demand. His attack is not anything special. List Inquisitor with the Force Refresh definitely helps with Force Pulse, but once he's wounded, paying 3 for a Force Pulse is tough. I think that part of why I put him in the bottom of A tier, I even considered high B. I was waffling because I think Empire's in an okay position now. I think we saw some good competition at Smite from Grand Inquisitor and Iden, and I also think Fifth Brother is basically a staple in Empire. I think if you're running Empire, you're running Fifth Brother. But I just think that I very rarely am super jazzed. I think if he needs to take a point, he can definitely do it. But I think that just compared to some other supports we're going to see, I could not in good conscience see him in S tier. I definitely agree he's an A tier. I just think that he is not at the top for me personally.
I love the idea of A tier being a tier of, you have to think of why you're not going to run them. That's typically my idea of an A tier unit. And I think Fifth Brother fits in there right now. I think there are reasons why you don't run him. I think there are discussions, single body problems, but I think because he's so early, we don't have to worry about high tier or low tier. We can argue about that for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm happy to just put him there for now, and we'll see where he ends up.
Yep. Context will make a lot of things happen.
He's currently both the top and bottom, so Sam and I both win.
Man, we're just making people happy. That's what we do. All right, our next one is going to be Phil's clones. I actually have Sam taking this one as well, partly because I know that he's played with them a bunch and played around with them a bunch and has opinions on them.
I think they're C tier. I think that they have some lists where I think they're interesting, and they're 3 cost, and their tree is not great, but they have really solid expertise for a 3 cost, which makes it really interesting. But if you want a 3 cost in Republic that's going to get you a shove, or if you just want a 3 cost that's going to get you a shove anywhere, they're the best to do it. So they have some utility. They just do no damage, which is the real downside. Somewhere in C tier. Not sure exactly where they end up, but C.
Matt, you got any thoughts on Phil's clones?
Yeah, Sam and I were talking about Phil's clones the other day, and my chief observation was the main thing holding them back in competition to some of the other 3 cost clone supports is that they only have 1 icon on their first step of their tree. And that is everything else in their kit is really, really solid. I think it's compounded by the fact that one of their 2 icons on their second step is a recover, which can be great, but it means that often their attack is 1 damage and a shove, which is a little bit middling compared to what you can get other places. But the rest of their kit's pretty solid, and they're totally fine. Yeah, I think they're C tier for sure. I think they're going to end up below C tier just because there's a lot of competition in the faction for them. But there are reasons to play them.
Yeah, I think eventually they float down. I almost gave these guys to Scott because I know that Scott has a lesser opinion of them. I think they're going to float to the bottom. Part of their issue is that a little bit of their kit is attached to Phil, and Phil is in a very tough spot, if not a terrible spot. And I love the kit of Phil's clones. I think they are a C tier unit, but if Scott really wanted to fight it, I would entertain the D tier. But we're not going to right now because he's still muted. Kick it, Scott. Tell us.
I mean, I'm not gonna fight it. Like, I'll tell you this, based off of the 2 games I've played with them, I think they're hot, messy garbage. I don't see a single reason you would take them. You guys are like, oh, there's some lists where they're interesting. And I'm like, okay, are you running those lists? So I don't know, but I trust you guys enough with more experience, having played it, particularly Matt and Sam, that I'm willing to trust you if you say they're low C tier. That's not super far off. And it might be that I would never run them. So I'm fine with that there. I'm just definitely really down on them. I really
just wanted to hear Scott talk about them because we've talked about them in the past. Again, I get them. I see why both sides, but we're leaving them in C for now, and we'll see where it goes up and down.
Yeah, we can see where D tier ends up, and if they need to drop down, we can make that adjustment later.
That's also true. Nothing set in stone yet. And we're going to move right on to the next 3 cost support. These are kind of in alphabetical order, but they're not in exact alphabetical order, so we're going to jump a little bit. And these are ARF troopers, the elite art troopers. Matt, where do you got them?
I think ARF troopers are really solid. They are, I think, one of the better 3 cost supports in the game. They used to be that the old version of them with their CF exposed was pretty wild, but +1 health is great. Consistent access to shove and pin is great. Supporting fire dash, we have learned, is just a really phenomenally flexible ability, but they don't output a ton of damage unless they spike super hard, which they just don't do that often. I think this is really tough for me to pinpoint them exactly. I think they're somewhere in the neighborhood of like low A tier, high B tier. I think they're often the first 3 cost support that you look to play if you're running Republic.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, and I think that's right where they are, is that very low A. Kind of the same with Fifth Brother. Fifth Brother is more of a staple, but ARF, in my opinion, you are running them unless you find a reason not to, unless you find the meta reason, unless you understand a purpose of fitting the 501st or fitting someone else, who we'll talk about the 501st in a little bit. But they have a little bit of everything. They're not great at anything. Their issue is that, they don't hit super hard right now. And you're no longer willing to play a point down with them, I think, which is a
absolutely
good thing. It used to be that you would just throw them in anywhere, but now I feel like you're not playing a point down with them. Scott, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, JK, I think your categorization of A is really good. This is a staple that I assume I will play. and I am making a choice to opt out of it for something else. So I think for me, spoiler, I'm going to put the 501st above 212 and below ARFs. And so I think either top of B or bottom of A. I'm fine with either. I would opt for bottom of A beneath Fifth Brother. So, because I think you guys, I agree everything you said.
Yeah, I like them below Fifth Brother because I think Fifth Brother is a really discrete reward piece for running Empire right now. He's one of the heavy motivating reasons that you want to play Empire, whereas ARFs are a really, really solid role player. But I don't know that you're ever going to be sitting there and being like, oh man, but if I switch to Republic, I could play ARFs. I think ARFs are solid, but I don't think they're like that motivating of a power on the table.
Yeah. And you no longer have them despite being 7 or 8 points. It's now, I have 7 points. Am I taking ARFs, or is there a reason to take something else?
Yeah, it used to be, it was the biggest decision you would make in your Republic list is where do I put my ARFs? And now they're one of your tools in your toolkit.
Okay, let's slide on. I feel good about that overall. And we're going to go to the B1 units. And I have these as Sam again. Scott, we'll get to you in a second, I promise.
D tier. These guys are awful. They have no defenses. Their synergy is bad currently. Just not the thing you want to be playing.
More like D.
Oh, hey, I almost want to put them in C tier just because that's where every Separatist goes. The reason you play them is because you have to play Separatists, and that's a terrible reason to play something. I don't think we need to spend too much time on them. They didn't get touched in the buff. They just got left behind, and it's a little sad panda. But
One thing I want to flag with B1s, because I think this is a trend that we'll notice as we're talking, is that specific threshold of units that have like 9 or 10 effective health on supports has been really, really difficult to balance correctly. It is really difficult to have a functional kit that does other things when you just have that much health, and 9 health with conditional protection. Like that can wallop you if you're not paying attention. But the problem is that they pay so much to have that they're just kind of not doing anything on their own activation.
yeah, it'd be different if they were part of a sensational tier. If it was, well, I have to bring B1s to take Cassian or something like that, then you're like, oh yeah, I would take B1s, sure. But instead it's, I'm taking General Grievous, so I get to take B1s, which, whatever. Okay, next up is going to be bounties. Original bounty hunters. I have these for myself, I believe, and I struggle with these guys because I think they're solid. They're perfectly fine. They have their own move. You're not going to be sad playing them, but they have just officially been left behind in every kind of sense of the situation. They're perfect. They're very perfectly fine in a lot of things. And I think ultimately them being perfectly fine, but you don't play them in any era. You kind of just have better things to take almost no matter what. But I don't think that's necessarily a fault of their own. I think they're either a very low end B tier unit or maybe the top end of C, where you're trying to balance out a thing, but you are running them out of synergy more than out of prosperity, if that makes sense. Sam, what do you think?
I have them in C tier, partly because there's a different support we'll get to later that got buffed that kind of just eats their lunch and is played everywhere where the bounty hunters would be played now. Even in like all bounty hunter lists, people will give up on the synergy just for some better stats most of the time. So I think put them in C tier and we're fine.
Yeah, I would almost be inclined to drop them to D tier just because there's no reason to play them. But I think their kit is solid enough, like good enough that they feel C tier to me. It's just they are outclassed by other stuff in the list that you would normally want to run them.
Yeah, I couldn't put them in D tier. Scott, go.
Well, I was going to say, I agree with everything said. I don't know that I would put them in D tier, and that I think there is a hypothetical scenario where you could want all bounty hunter synergy. But I think that I probably wouldn't fight anyone on D tier because they definitely have been replaced in a way that you're really not going to see them. But there's still people who are going to run them. So I think high or low C makes sense.
We'll have them here, and we'll work as we get going forward. Our next figure up is our first Spectre unit. We got Chopper, and Chopper I'm giving to Scott right now. Scott, tell me your thoughts on C1010P or whatever his name is.
So little war criminal Chopper is really interesting because I mean I used to run him in the full Spectre, which I think you honestly could still run full Spectre and have probably a swing time. The problem with Chopper in my mind is that the only reason to run him, the only reason, is to give Kanan a more effective revenge trigger. He is a single body that does not have tie break. His melee attack's fine, push it, but he's not really any sort of playmaker. And so you are playing down a figure without the normal requisite compensation. And so there's really no reason why you'd run him over something with less synergy. For me, I can see if you're going all Spectres, still a situation to run him. So I would put him in C tier, but I don't think he makes it into B for me because I think, just generally speaking, there's just a lot better supports that are taken in the list that he used to live in.
Yep. Sam, give me your thoughts on your boy. Any pushback there?
I'm fine with him being at the top of C tier. I still think he's a B tier unit. Like, I think that he's fine enough in these lists that are doing well. I'm happy with, but at the same time, I've moved away from playing him. So I can't argue too much about a C tier placing here. So I think I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Matt?
Yeah, I think it's really saying something that for as underwhelming of an activation that he is, the fact that he just slightly improves Kanan is such a reward that you're willing to play him. I absolutely think he's a C tier unit that fluctuates. He tips towards the top of C tier or B tier just because Kanan is that good, and Kanan is still that good. And so you can still play him. You can still do it for sure. And you're not going to notice his problems as much because Kanan does so much work on the table. But I think he belongs in C tier.
I'm completely on board with all of this. Sorry, my boy Chopper, but there's just so much support in that time frame now. We're gonna move on to B2s. B2s, Sammy Sam, give me your sad separatist take on the B2.
These guys are C tier. They're garbage, but they're the best garbage you got. Like, if you're playing Separatists, you're playing these guys. They're near the bottom of C tier. We can put them below Phil's. I don't think they're in a particularly great spot in the meta.
They are so tantalizingly close to being a great figure, to being an interesting figure, and they're just not. Every time I see them, I go, "Oh, they're that ability, that's so cool. That's so cool," and it just none of it ever like plays out. Sort of all falls apart.
Yeah, it's wild that their only problem is that their expertise is bad and their dice pools are bad. And if they got a slight upgrade on those things, if they got steps on their expertise instead of just damage, suddenly you start to see some real fire happening there. Like, they are not that far off, but the breakpoints are just wrong.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that one. We're going to slide forward and we're going to go to the first set of Mandos in our supports. We're going to the Clan Krees. We have talked about Clan Krees so much in our time, as they are a core tier unit. They have been a specifically B tier, perfect baseline unit from the get-go. I am not looking to shake anything up. I'm going to throw them B tier. They are perfectly standard workhorse support units, and I love them for it. And I know that this may come off as callous and evil, but that's just exactly who they are. Does anyone have any thoughts other than B tier love for our Mandos? This is how we're saving time, by knowing that, hey, you have 100 episode of us talking about Mandos. Next, we're going to go to Coverts, which is realistically just the upgraded version of the Clan Krees Mandos. Ironically, Scott, Kenny, and I talked about them in our last episode, and Kenny is really high on them. I am high on them. They are just significantly better. I think they are right at the break point between A and B. We've talked about them. If you're taking Mandos, you are taking Coverts. You cannot not take them. It's not even that you're actively harming yourself. You are making a bad list. And they have they're great at a little bit of everything. And I'm going to throw them at the bottom of A to start and let everyone else talk me up or down and see from there. And Scott, you want to go first?
So this is a tough one because Coverts are absolutely better than Fifth Brother and Arfs in my mind. They are just brought down by the fact that they are in a list that is worse than what the Republic is doing and what the Empire is doing. Oops All Mandos it's a difficult proposition. I think if there was a bit more flexibility outside of the list that they go in, right? If they weren't really dependent on a lot of synergies in the way that Mandos tend to be, I think they would be, right up at the top of A tiers. I think they're in the A tier. I think it's tough. It's tough to evaluate the meta because, like as you said, they are a staple. You kind of define a JK as A is it's going to be here. I have to think of a reason to not bring them. To do something else, and I'm just like, okay, but there isn't a reason not to bring them in Mandos. That's got to count for something. I don't know. It's definitely A. I don't know where it ranks, either in between the two or above the two or below them, but somewhere.
Put them in between the two. I think that coverts are a big payoff of why you're playing Mandos. That support unit is part of what makes the faction playable and really strong, more so than ARFs. But fifth is also in many ways one of those payoffs for Empires.
Matt, any qualms here?
No, I think this is exactly right. I've heard dedicated Mando players, I think, complain about their disappointments in every single unit that regularly gets played in Mando lists except for coverts. Nobody has any complaints about coverts, even though they have 7 health, which is wild.
Yep. If you swapped out all the things that said Mandalorian and put Rebel Alliance, they are absurd. Just absurd. So I think that's where they are. Kenny would probably want to push us into S tier, but he's not here and he's wrong, so he's gonna have to live with that. Okay, we're gonna go to the OG supports, the first of the first, the 501st. Matt, where are the buffed firsts living?
Well, they're no longer the 5-0 worst. They used to be just straight up the worst unit in the game, not even just the worst support, but the worst unit. And their change in the patch has been really phenomenal. I think they are a really solid workhorse unit. They somehow managed to get past the fact that they very rarely are going to shove, because like having 2 steps that give you 3 damage in a pin for 7 damage in a pin across 2 attacks in a combat action is like phenomenal. Coordinated fire strain is great. And then they have that kind of basic fine defense, 8 health, defensive maneuver. They just do their thing. I think they are honestly so close to ARFs. I think we really underrated these guys when they first were spoiled. I want to put them in A tier right below ARFs, because I think often you are picking one or the other for your list. I do think ARFs are kind of the more dynamic figure, but also the 501st player role in a faction that sometimes has a hard time generating damage from its secondaries and supports. Yet they show up and they say, hey, I have damage. I could be talked into dropping them down to B tier if that's where we want to make the split, but I put them right next to ARFs here.
Sam, what do you think?
I had them in B, but I'm also have like if we're calling them the very bottom of A, I think that's totally fine too. I just think that ARFs are just more consistently like I'm consistently taking ARFs, and then first I'm probably taking them, but they're not as much a staple for me.
Yeah, I am going to I have them just at the top of B, and I'm going to put them there. We can argue once we get to the end if there's another thing for it. But going back to, again, personal rankings, they don't have to state anything. I'm taking ARFs unless I see a reason to go fight the fighters, and I'm gonna stack it a little bit that way.
Totally fair.
And again, we're not the order of magnitude on that jump is very little. Scott?
I have them at the top of B. I mean, I already mentioned between 212 and ours, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. I think we're feeling good here. Okay, up next we have one of the many dark helmeted people. I believe these guys are the Death Troopers.
That is correct.
Okay, Scott, talk us about the green visored Death Trooper support units.
So Death Troopers are not a super common sight at a lot of competitive events, which has just surprised me because I think they're kind of slept on a little bit here. Mostly, I think the problem is 7 health is rough, even with protection. You know, we saw the clone commandos have that trouble. The problem is, so they have a focus, a dash. They have supporting fire dash, which is amazing. They have protection and impact 1. They give a cover out. So they can be pretty versatile in what you need to do. They synergize with Stormtrooper Sergeant. So I think if you're doing a list with Stormtrooper Sergeant, the way you do it, if you bring the right configuration, everybody's adding 3 dice, right? Kind of a fixer situation. For me, I think that they are slept on a little bit in Empire. So for me, I would probably say D tier, probably just either. I struggle. I'm going to defer to you guys to help me out with this. If you agree, they should be in B tier, because I think they are worse than the 501st. I think they are probably on par with the 212, because I think they don't have the struggles the 212 does, and they're more versatile. So I kind of want to put them between the 501st and 212. But I would also hear arguments for them being below the 212 and below Clan Freeze. I think there could be good arguments there, particularly because of the 7 health. I think if they had 8 health, they would be bow chicka wow wow A tier, but they don't, so they're not.
Yep. Sam, what do you think?
I think I like them. I think I like them right below 212 is where I put them, but I think everything Scott said is right, that they're slept on, that they're a good unit, should probably be played more.
Yeah, I look at them and I keep thinking that they should be there. And just Empire lists aren't running that synergy right now. And so, which obviously, if we're making meta calls, but we're not making full meta calls here, we're making our calls. I think that's right where I would be actually curious to compare them with Clan Kreese, because they're both impact up close units, and I bet they have some interesting synergies going on there. But I'm totally fine with these guys being where they are as the first of the Empire troopers, and we're gonna keep going through, and I think we'll might adjust a little bit as we go here and there. But next up, we're gonna go to our boys Techo. Matt, talk about the support of the Bad Batch.
So these guys used to be kind of the cream of the crop in terms of Republic forecast supports. And as the rest of Republic supports have kind of risen up, I think their stock has really, really declined. They're totally fine units. You can play them. You can do fine with them. I just think you have a lot of better options. And the specific synergies that they enable there's just not enough juice there to be worth sacrificing, the other stuff that you would run. To call some of that out specifically, they have the option to do the failure convert to an expertise with Hunter, but the math on that is that the expertise is on average less good than the strike conversion anyway. You can decide if it hits a breakpoint that matters to you. Hunter also has his out of activation movement that's an advance for them instead of a dash, and so those are kind of the reasons to run them with Hunter. And then they also have some like cool hunker synergy that used to make them a really appealing glue that was binding Kenobi and Hunter together. There's just better stuff for that now. And I think in particular, we'll talk about this more, but there are some other forecast supports that I would just rather run with Kenobi and other ones that I would rather run with Hunter right now. So like, I kind of want to put them in D tier, not because they're actively bad, but because Scott is often critical of like my ability to think of niche cases where I would play something and therefore they belong in C. I can't really come up with any reason that I would put Techo on the table right now as somebody who's playing like full Republic Premier lists.
Interesting. Scott?
I trust Matt.
Yeah, I agree from a pure, again, meta standpoint. Right now, everything just passed them. I don't know of anything that they do that is better than another clone. It just feels bad because they were arguably mid to upper B tier units 6 months ago, and at the same time, we're gonna slap them at the top of D and have people get mad at us. But if you're doing this,
this is a good spot for them. I thought I was going to have to argue that they were worse than Phil's. Like, I thought that was going to be actual discussion, but it turns out, nope, we're all on the same page. They're really bad right now.
Yeah. If the scoundrel tag gets built out more to where you want to do Hunter scoundrel lists, I could see them cropping up again. But there's just not enough going on. Hondo is just not enough motivation to want to do that right now.
Scott, a quick question. Would you rather have Phil's or Echo or Techo?
In what context?
I don't know. Just in general. Who would you put over one or the other?
If I was running Bad Batch, in the context of Bad Batch, I'd probably run Tech and Echo. In any other context, I'd run Phil's. And even then, I might still run Phil's. Because as Matt points out, for the most part, the switching to an expertise is immaterial. And so being able to just fix it to a hit is just as good. So, and that's the reason why you really run them there. I think Tech and Echo can do more damage. So I think I'll stick with what I said. If it's Bad Batch, I'd run Tech and Echo. If it's any other Republic, I'd run Phil's.
Yeah, I was just curious about that, but that's great answer. Now let's talk about the real powerhouse of the Empire, Del Meeko. Scott, where do you have?
I mean, he's a sniper. Stands for sniper. S tier, baby. No, I think Del Meeko is maybe the second worst support in the game, which is really interesting because I don't think it would take a lot to fix him. Trick shot is pointless except against very specific lists. He seems kind of like an Obi counter, where he's going to be like, I'm going to remove hunkers and I'm going to ignore cover. I'm going to get to shoot twice. And it's, wow, that's so cool. Do you have a tiebreaker because you're only one unit? No. If you're going to utilize your combat actions, you have a reposition or advance? No, just a dash, and I can only focus if I'm in forward of an enemy. But aren't you a sniper who's supposed to sit on the back line? Well, yeah. It's like, okay, so you really need Iden to go first so that you can dash, right? He's like, yeah, but she's going to bring the ISFs because even nerfed, they're better than you, right?
And even if not, Gideon Hask got nerfed.
Yeah. He also has horrible. I guess Tree's fine except for the fact that it has no pushes because it's, well, we're giving you pushes on expertise. Okay, so I can max out at one push if I roll an expertise. So that's great. Also, his expertise is 1 to 2 for one push and 3 to 4 for a crit and a push. If I roll 4 crits and I get 1 result off, or 4 expertise and get 1 result off of it, or if I'm doing a melee attack, 1 to 3 gives me a crit and a block to a fail. So again, three expertise might get me 1.5 kind of results, right? So he needs his stuff fixed. He needs to be a secondary, honestly. They need to up his health by 1. They need to fix his expertise. And then, like, cool, I can make 2 shots. Not super mobile, but that's okay. I ignore cover. Then he'd be fine. Then you run him, Iden in the secondary, and then you can run whatever you want in the support. So cool, that's fun. That's great. But right now, there's literally, they nerfed the other alternative for him, and he's still way worse. He is a D tier. I will hear no arguments to the contrary.
I was going to make a joke about Matt defending him.
No, I think Delmiko is the poster boy of a really interesting observation in Shatterpoint, which is that movement and just having a warm body and being able to move a warm body or an extra one is so valuable in Shatterpoint that none of the units that have access to the ability to spend a second action on an attack use that ability at all. And Delmiko, that is his identifying feature, is that he can attack twice, and it does not help him at all. He's just bad.
Yep. He's just bad. All right. Now let's move on to something that's less bad. Still might be bad. They're not bad. Dark Troopers. Scott, they were the cream of the cream. Where are they now?
Dark Troopers used to be, can't even say this, and I wouldn't really fight them on it. They're probably the best unit in the game. They made their defense just worse. They dropped them in health. They have the same problem as kind of the Death Troopers in that they only have 7 health. They have protection, but they only have 7 health. They no longer have crit mitigation. They just have 1 for 1 and 2 for 2 defense. So they are just a lot easier to wound now. But the thing is, they still are immune to pin. They still give out coordinated fire strain. They have jump jets, right? Or jump boots, so they have access to a jump. And they can't be pushed and pulled by force abilities. In my mind, they are everything that the Fire First is plus. So they're definitely above the Fire First. I think they are probably better than ARFs as well. So I think I'd put them towards the bottom of A tier, below the coverts, because I think they're a lot easier to wound now, but they still have a lot of good utility. Their attacks were never amazing. The thing is that part of was they not only just lost what they got, but they were great in the context of having Gideon Haas give them a free strike, which was really impactful because their break point is kind of steps. So being able to get access to a second push or a jump is huge for them. And the fact that they lack that now is rough. Their melee attacks, 3 to 4 expertise for a crit and auto damage is absolute hot garbage. So it's not as good as it used to be. Their ranged expertise is fine.
I would argue that if you're looking at an attack tree, the best thing you can have on your first step in an attack tree is 1 damage and a shove. And the second best thing you can have is 2 damage. And they get to pick. They have both of those on their first step, which is wild. And that is a lot of what pushes ARFs and Fire First up. What's interesting is I see a lot of Empire players opting out of them just because they value the Stormtrooper tag synergy more. I'm kind of curious about that, but I also am not like super in touch with like the state of Empire right now. I'm totally fine to leave them in an A. I think they're still a really solid support. It kind of lacks a shell that can really leverage everything they have.
Yeah. I will say, Matt, from what we're seeing Empire-wise, people are not opting into the Stormtrooper tag either. They are opting into the Inquisitors and still running ISFs and
Darks.
just having fun with that. Like that's what we're seeing a lot of. And then ISBs make it as well for some reason.
They're a solid 3.
They're a solid.
Yeah, you take them because you have
3.
to.
When you have 3 points, they are a figure in Shatterpoint. All right. I feel good about this. I do think Dark Troopers are very in flux. Sam, you got any thoughts?
Nope, this is great.
Okay. We're going to move on to one of the other huge jumpers in the patch, and that is the Fourth Sister. Scott, keep your terror going with some Fourth Sister discussion.
Yeah, so I really like the Fourth Sister. That is not necessarily going to be reflected in where I put her, but I really like what they do with her. So she's got access to diceless. She's really mobile. She has a ranged attack. She synergizes really well with Reva. She also has a tiebreaker. She is less, her Enfeeble is giving a pin rather than an expose. Although Enfeeble is people just either don't remember it or it just does not come up a lot. Whenever she advances, she can instead reposition, which gives her some flexibility when she's engaged. She has a push and a damage on 1. She's got pretty decent. The really cool thing is she can dash on her attack. So if she gets 2 expertise on a ranged attack, so you can have Reva have her call the hunt, move up Fourth Sister, attack, get 2 expertise, which gives her a crit and a dash, and now she's tie breaking a point. I think she's really cool. Got 6 defense in expertise, 5 defense in melee. She also has the dash on 3 expertise and defense. And so I think she's really cool, really interesting. I think she just kind of doesn't make the cut. I think Oops All Inquisitors, I think people just prefer Fifth Brother. I think the protection and steadfast go a long way. Also, her force pull is just worse than force repulse, even though it is cheaper. There's less utility, and obviously that's reflected in the cost. I am going to put her at the tippy top of C, based pretty solely because obviously I have a high opinion of her. But I think in the context of where you would take her, you are probably taking Fifth Brother 2, and you are playing down 2 supports, and that's a very specific list. And so it feels niche, and so that feels like top of C. I don't think she's a super flexible unit that works in a lot of places. I really like what she does in the places where she does them.
Sam?
So I've seen some lists. I have her in B tier. I think my thing is I think she's just a cut above all the other C's there. I think there's a difference between her and Chopper here that is greater than her and Clan Freeze. And I've seen some lists pop up that you're taking a full Empire list and you take Inquisitor, Obi-2, Fifth Brother, and then under a different 8-point, like under Moth, you're doing like Moth, Reva, Fourth Sister, and then you're never actually playing those 2 together. You're playing mix and match, right? And so you have one Inquisitor package somewhere over here and a different one somewhere over there with Krennic or Vader somewhere else there. And so I think she has these meta considerations and niches that aren't just the full Inquisitor.
Sorry, what was that word you used, Sam?
Some meta considerations outside of full Inquisitor.
No, I think there was one word you used after that where it was niches, right? And that's, I think, the piece, right? Is it niche, or do you feel she works? Like, how flexible? I think, how many other lists do you think she really goes in?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that there's a couple of those. There's the all Inquisitors, like what you mentioned, and then kind of these hybrid lists that I've talked about here. These Moth, Reva, Fourth Sisters that are going with Krennic or Vader. And I just think her quality is just so much that she shows up in more places than the rest of the C tier.
Yeah, here's the thing, Sam. I think our kit is A tier. Again, it's just kind of tough because I guess I consider it a little more niche because you just don't see her, even in the niches that exist. And, different metas abound, and maybe she exists a lot elsewhere. But I think, Matt, JK, I'll defer to you. If we want to put her in B, I'll be happy. I'd love to see that.
I like her in low B tier. I agree that I think the base power level of her kit is like in competition with the A tier like supports. I think it makes sense to downgrade her a little bit for context because you're right. It's hard to find a spot for her because of the competition from Fifth Brother and just the other high quality Empire supports. But I like her in low B tier.
That's my gut instinct as well. I remember when the patch first hit, and I think she immediately fell into the A tier because we were like, holy crap, this is so good. And then as play has happened, she's slid down because people remembered that Fifth Brother is still Fifth Brother and just the way things work. I totally get what you're saying, Scott. And obviously this is the magic and terror of tier lists, is we have to find everything. So, but yeah, I think the gap between Chopper and Clan Kryze is big enough that I think she's probably B tier. So sorry, Scott, your Empire is a little better than you think.
Yeah. Honestly, my hot take is that I think, and I need to try it, I honestly think sometimes it'd be better to take Fourth Sister than Fifth Brother. That's my hot take. That is completely theoretical, but I don't know. It's how I feel.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of arguments for that. I agree with you.
Okay, next up, we're going to go with our lovely little non-rebel rebels, Han and Chewie. I have these guys. This is a very interesting rank, partly because of what has come in the previous 3 months. We, right now in this discussion, don't have our previous 3 in the ratings completely. We're going to talk about the very end, but we started this before Jin and Delta came out, and so we didn't have those considered earlier. But we did have Han and Chewie. I think Han and Chewie 3 months ago were an S tier unit. I think they are the very top of A tier, partly because they are still very good, but I just think you are taking Baze and Chirrut unless you have a reason to take Han and Chewie. But Han and Chewie are very, very good. And if you're running something in that timeline, you can put them in so many different scenarios and situations that make them worth it. So that's my general thought. Sam, what do you think?
Come down on them a lot in the Baze and Chirrut era. I have them in B tier because of that. They have an A tier kit at least, but I'm just struggling to find a place for them, which is why I have them on the top of B. currently. So I'm interested to hear where Scott and Matt are.
Yeah, so I think that I think we have to think about it in this particular context. If you said to me, Scott, you have to build a rebel list, where would you rank Han and Chewie on the tier list building a rebel strike force? I would agree with you, Sam. In the context where I could build a rebel premier, I would put them in A tier because I think they have the kit. I think that there are 9 out of 10 times you're going to take Baze and Chirrut. I do think there is 1 out of 10 times where you're building a murder list or Han and Chewie are something you would take. And so I still think that they deserve to be an A tier just because I think, they have a force repress capability. They have ridiculous mobility. They have the ability to hand out conditions to affect an attack. They have a high damage output. Obviously they're not defensive, and that's, a great, and they pale in comparison to Baze and Chirrut. But I think that, putting them below the ARFs feels wrong to me. So I would probably split the difference with you.
That's so interesting. This is maybe our biggest point of disagreement. And I was one of the first people like riding the Han and Chewie hype train pretty hard. I think they have a lot of great things. I think that they have a couple of things that do hold them back just in their kit. Like their defensive expertise is just absolute trash. They make up for that by having 10 health, but that does mean that it's pretty easy to just like chip some damage into them. Like they're not difficult to like gun down if you need to gun them down. And they have a lot of ticky-tack sequencing things that you need to do in order to pull stuff off. But they can do lots of kooky stuff. If you're not familiar, you can do a thing where you take a combat action, I don't attack anybody, and I just use that to pay the force to resolve their, reposition thing, right? So they have some stuff. But Baze and Chirrut are so much better. And Han and Chewie don't have the rebel tag. You have to pay for it. And I think that being in a faction where there's only one 9-cost primary, and there are 2 5-cost supports, and one of them is Baze and Chirrut, is really, really difficult. I think Luke is fine, secondary Luke, but you often are making sacrifices to run Han and Chewie in a way that you just aren't for Baze and Chirrut or the other rebel support options. I have a really hard time wanting to put them above C. I think they have an A tier kit. I just think that the lack of tag synergy plus some of their other downsides plus their competition makes it really hard to ever want to put them on the table right now.
All right, we need to find a spot for our Han and Chewie boys. See, my issue is they are just better than most of the things that we have on our list right now. But I also understand, I completely understand this is meta. We need to discuss how the world's working right now. But yeah, it is weird because again, if we did this a month ago before we were considering Baze and Chirrut or whatever it was, we know where they go. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm okay if we split the difference and we say like, hey, they're going to land somewhere kind of in the mix in B tier, because I do genuinely think it's the case that like if I sit down across from somebody at a tournament who's put Han and Chewie on the table, I'm not going to look at that and be like, oh, you made a huge mistake, right? I think that there are better things that you can do, but they're not going to lose you a game. They're going to do good work for you. You just have to put more into making them work than an option that can do more with less, right?
I'm on board there. I don't know. People will yell at us for this. Whatever. What do I care? I feel the arguments every different way, and obviously I had them very, very high because I don't think we've stretched their muscle of list building yet. Again, the problem is Baze and Chirrut just have everything. Baze and Chirrut are still faction agnostic as well as Han and Chewie are, and that's the real issue.
I also think these guys would really rise if the scoundrel tag gets built out more, right? They're a really great, if we get like a 9-cost primary that's built around the scoundrel, if we had a Hondo that was a 9-cost that was in their era, that we could start to see some really spicy stuff there, I think.
Oh no, I think this is like their low point. I don't see them getting much lower than where they are in our tier list right now. There's some things I want to try with them with scoundrels. There's some Jin Lando nonsense that makes them rebels, and all of a sudden their force issues go away. And they're getting free rerolls from Callus if you want on their turn. You can do some nonsense with them that I'm interested to try. So maybe there's something, but I think this where they are right now is fine enough, and people can yell at us and we'll move on.
Yep.
For the sake of audio listeners, we've put them in B tier, right in the middle, below 212th and above the Death Troopers.
Someone's just going to have to be good with this, and we're okay. All right. Next up is IG-11. IG-11 is a big benefit of the patch, not for him, but for Hondo. or for CAD getting excess synergy. That being said, the more I play with, we have talked about Scott came in, like Scott ran the Evergreen with the bounty list. Sam and I have talked about this bounty list. It is really good. IG has work in it, but the problem is there are these figures called Bays and Chirrut. We just talked about this. Because of this, I think IG has so many cool things that he could possibly do along with IG-88, but IG-11, he might even fit low end of C tier, but I think he's probably right in the middle to high end of C tier. Scott, what are you thoughts on Mr. 11?
So I liked 11 the time that you played him against me. I think he's got some interesting kind of stuff in his kit. He is a single body. He costs 5. You would never run him outside of the context of CAD. Honestly, I cannot, with Bays and Chirrut, I can't think of a scenario where you would run him. So I think he's a D tier for me.
He might
love
be
him.
again.
I just think that, if Bays and Chirrut didn't exist, I'd feel fine in C, but I just don't think a 5 cost support with only one figure, because murder is great, but murder does not make the world go round, particularly in a world with so much revenge triggering.
Yep. I'm going to put him on the very bottom of C tier, and we can move him down to D tier if needs be, if we have a great field. I feel bad for putting things in D tier that I could actually field decently, and so that's why I'm going to keep him just out. I guess that might be an argument of why Techo should be just out of it, but we're going to move on for now. Okay, next up, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to talk about Ewok, the bow people. These are the trappers. These are the hunters. They are the 3 cost Ewoks. I bring that up because they're still D tier. You don't bring them because if you're bringing Ewoks right now, you're bringing Leia. If you're bringing Leia, you are bringing every single rebel. And if you're bringing every single rebel, you are bringing every single thing that is better than these guys. They are the better of the Ewoks, but I don't know why you would do anything with them. Maybe you could argue them into the lowest end of C tier, but I'm going to put them just fresh into D tier and move on, unless someone has a grand desire to argue them up a little. Nope, bunch of shaking heads, because
I would argue that they belong lower because their kit is bad. Their kit is so bad that it is actively a mistake to run them in their own list. Like I like them right above.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I think they have a few sprinkling things that you could argue, but don't really want to. We're doing mental gymnastics to get a 2.0. There's no reason to do this. We're going to move on to a fluctuating figure, and that is the ISFs. And I believe Scott has them on my list. Yeah, Scott, kick us off with the former poster boys.
Yeah, so the ISFs used to be the second best support in the game, in my humble opinion, and they have fallen far. I don't think they've fallen to the bottom at all, but the thing is that there are people that are still running them and they still like them. Having played against them, I've played against, Iden Inquisitor with the full Inquisitor kit of Reva and Fifth Brother, and then the full Iden kit of Iden, Gideon, ISFs. They have definitely fallen off. The big problem, apart from, they still have good expertise. That's all well and good. Their tree is just not nearly as good, and without access to pushes, and because of Gideon Hast's nerf, again, his nerf spreads wide, the ISS are less likely to tree. And because they spread their damage out towards the end of the tree, the odds of them maxing and they used to be able to do 8 damage, which basically 8 damage between 2 attacks from the ISFs. You were most likely to wound basically anything in the game. They were like the best wounding figures. But now the odds of you wounding are a lot less likely. And I think just the lack of flexibility with pushes, I personally think they are a C tier unit. A high C because I still think they have some value. Covert operations is still good. I think their tactic is great, being able to recover a condition and a health. That's totally still a fine feature. I just think that the reason they could get away with not having pushes was because it was so likely they were going to wound. But not having pushes just creates a lack. They create a liability. If you pull them and the enemy is very defensive, then you're hosed. And they went from being something that was basically never a dead activation because they could kill anything to now a liability sometimes. And so you also wouldn't run them, before you wouldn't run them outside of Iden and Gideon because, well, it's just the best thing. Now you wouldn't run them because they don't really work elsewhere.
Matt, any follow up on that? Any pushback thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree with Scott for the most part. I've been one of the most hesitant to say that their nerf was a problem because I think they are better than a lot of people give them credit for. You always have a thing where after the best thing gets nerfed, if it feels bad, people just don't want to play it. I think Infiltrate is still a phenomenal ability, especially in a world where 2 of the 4 possible mission sets require infiltration in order to like cover all your backline objectives. And I think really what's happening is that like people bring them for infiltration and they're willing to pay the tax on their like underwhelming kit in order to do that. And I think that's exactly what infiltration should be. I might argue for low B for them, but I think high C is fine.
Yeah, Sam, any fault? Yep.
I think
Okay.
this is fine.
Yeah, and the other thing was it used to be that you had to run revenge, and maybe it was a little bit of a tax of you're bringing Spectre to counter this. And now, since revenge is also so good, well, now a pure murder bot in ISFs who can't do much else, they are pulled down because murder isn't always the answer. That's our PSA for the day. The more you know. All right, I feel good about this. Sam, I'm going to have you talk about the ISBs. Their B counterparts.
These guys are super interesting because I see them kind of popping up all over the place in Empire lists, but their kit feels very middling. So it is kind of a tricky place for me. Honestly, I have them probably about the same place as the ISF, top of C. I think they're solid. You're going to play them. They're going to perform fine. But they aren't. They're a thing you take because you're taking a 7-point primary, right?
Yeah, I might even argue them lower because I just think there's probably better ones out there. That being said, I actually do not know if I've seen them played in the year and a half that they've been out in testing and all of that. Because when you play with Thrawn, you would switch out and you get some other secondary. But I do see them played as well. And just because I haven't seen them doesn't mean that they don't exist. It's not, that's
Grand
that's
Moff
not a
Eric
huge thing.
plays them to great effect consistently.
Yep.
They're part of his like main list.
Yeah, and again, just because I don't, so I'm fine. I'm going to slap them below, partly because I still think range takes a little bit of ability. Scott?
So I played against these at the Evergreen Open. Josh Sercool had Mando Vader 3 ISBs, and I wasn't super impressed with the ISBs, but I think they are probably, I could see them seeing a lot more play than Chopper. You're right, you take them because they are the 3 costs that you can afford. And if you want to run Thrawn, they're probably going to be involved. It's either them or Stormtrooper Sergeant. And while he is definitely better now, he is still Stormtrooper Sergeant. And so you probably would rather run them than Stormtrooper Sergeant. Just depends on your context.
Okay. Matt, your love of Empire here.
Yeah. I've been a defender of ISBs, but I agree with exactly where you guys have put them.
Okay. Next up, we're going to go to Bar 2, which is Lando and R2. And we're going to kick it to Sam, who loves them and just won with them. And we're going to talk him down, and then he's going to be right because he just won with them. Sam? Chris.
They're a B tier unit. I think that they're a unit that people have discarded too fast. Post patch, people stopped seeing play, and they just do enough for a 3 cost. Their defensive expertise, the crit mitigation is surprisingly good on a 3 cost, and the ability to not be shot is handy, and they have good movement. Their extra dice is a fine thing that can help get that 1 shove on 2 when you really need it. For a 3 cost, they just feel like better value than you're getting from most 3 costs, which is why I put them in B tier. I think people are sleeping on them, and they should play them more. I think they're in a better meta spot than like Clan Kreese. So yeah, about middle. I'm good either side of the Death Troopers or wherever people feel.
Okay, yeah, you had talked a little bit on the Slack about how people were sleeping on them. I was wondering how high you were going to put them, but I feel that mid B. Granted, I feel like every time I run them, I roll them out and completely whiff on my attack, and then they die because I'm a bad player. But when they go off and when they do what they need to do, they have such an annoyance factor that makes them really good. And I know part of the reason they went away was people used to roll them with Vader 1, and they would roll 45 dice or whatever it was, and nothing else mattered. But when that got pulled away, I do know that fell apart, but I think this feels pretty right. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a perfect spot for him.
Okay, we're gonna move right along, and we're gonna get to just the best of the best here. Ewok Trappers, they're worse than their other ones, and I think they might even be worse than Del Miko. But they have 2, and they have large, and they have things that can happen when you play them. But whatever.
Yeah, I would put them below Dell. I mean, Dell can actually do something on his activation, and these guys can't. It feels like their entire kit is priced into the like value of the Ewok trap, but it's like way overdone. Like if you had Ewok trap card just gave you the effect of the crit every single time, that would not be enough to let you want to play these guys because they're just such a liability.
They have 2 bodies though. Dell only has 1.
Yeah, but those 2 bodies have 7 health and they don't shove and they don't do damage. I mean, they do, but they have a hard time doing it. And so, yes, Dell is 1 body, but they're going to walk up and die, and then you have 0 bodies.
Fair.
Death comes for us all. Something Master Splinter once said to Shredder. Okay, we're gonna go on to another one. Tell us about Magna Guards.
Magna Guards, I mean, they're bad. They're real bad. I think they're still better than B1s. I think what's wild to me is that like they're like my next example of like the 9-10 health on a support breakpoint is just really hard to balance around. In the previous meta, they were just a menace because they could shove you to Kingdom Come. They did a ton of damage. They had 10 health, and they would just stand on points and then be like, what are you going to do about it? And they've been kind of power crept out of the game, and they're really slow. They're really vulnerable to pin. They're really vulnerable to displacement. They're really vulnerable to spread out maps. I think they're probably in D tier, just right above B1s. And the main thing that hurt them, they could probably be unnerfed and they would still not see a ton of play right now. I think they probably need, or Separatists need some amount of redesign in order to have them because they're just too slow. Mobility is so important in the game right now that like being beefy and having like solid attacks is not good enough if you're slow and melee only.
Agreed. I don't know what they can do. I think you could.
Yeah.
I could probably argue them into C if I tried. Sam?
Yeah, so I played against them in the finals of Nova, and I agree they're in D tier because the entire time Duncan was playing around his reserve. He's like, I can't reserve certain things because I might just draw Magna Guards and lose. That's what they do. D tier.
Yeah.
Woof.
Again, I could argue them into C tier for the fact that he made it to the finals, but that is my experience with what it seems like with Magnas is I am just hoping I don't have to actually use them.
My hot take is I think you should just give Magna's infiltrate, and that would solve a lot of their problems.
Spicy.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm listening. All right, we're going to go to Super Commandos next, and we have Matt talking about Super Commandos, whether he likes it or not.
I mean, just put them next to Clan Kreese. I think they're slightly worse. They're super, super similar units. I think that they have a hard time finding play because they're less pushy and they're a little bit more brawly. But the problem is they're outclassed in the realm of brawlers in a way that Clan Kreese is not in the realm of pushers. Because if you're a pusher, you just need to hit the push and you're fine. And the rest of your kit, if it's functional, you're good. I think Soups have some cool stuff, but they are always the last pick Mando. They do see play for people that are doing the heavy full Mando flex thing, and they do fine work there. But if you're not running 3 or more squads of Mandos, you don't play these guys. But I think they're totally fine in B tier.
I don't think they're bad. I think that the loss of the era tag hurts them a lot, is why I'd put them in C. You have to start stretching to get them in. But I don't think the drop is huge.
I think they're definitely worse than Fourth Sister at the very least.
That's fair.
I don't care where they live rank wise. I just think they're worse than that.
I'm so used to keeping all the Mandos together because that's when they're stronger. But I think you guys are right. I think they go into C tier.
Yeah, we're separating them a tier apiece. Okay, let's move on to an interesting three cost one that has gone up and down in value, and that is Padawans. Matt, talk to us about our little younglings.
Padawans are interesting. I think we really panned them hard when they first got spoiled, and we found that actually they can do some cool stuff. They're really solid with Vader, and they're really solid if you're doing weird things with Mundi where you just need more Jedi bodies on the table. They're fine. They're especially fine if they get to stand next to Obi-2, and then their 7 health is not a liability anymore because everything that attacks them is disarmed and they can deflect you back. They are slow, they're melee only, they have some weird stuff. Their kit's not the most amazing, and there's a lot of competition in Republic, but I think they're better than Phil's clones. Like, I think they're C tier, and I think they're towards the top end of C tier. I would probably put them at the exact top of C tier right now.
Scott, what are your thoughts?
So I would probably put them between ISFs and ISBs. I agree with Matt. I think that they have place in play. I like a lot what they're doing, but I do think that I think they're definitely better than Chopper. I think they're definitely ISBs. I don't mind where you have them right now. I think you could probably put them below ISFs or other Mandos and feel fine. I think Matt's right.
I think they're better than Mandos, worse than ISF. I'd move Mandos down a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so ISFs, then Padawans, then Manda, then Soups.
Oh, I'm feeling good about that. Yeah, they have limitations. There's reasons to run them when there's a reason to run them. I'm feeling okay.
But also,
Matt,
like,
we're sticking with.
If you put them on the table with Vader 1, they slap. They will just kill you, and they will heal all the damage they deal themselves. Like,
yep. That is still a very, very viable thing. It's kind of fallen out of favor again with all of the changes, but it still hurts, man. Matt, we're going to stick with you. Some more Galactic Republic. We're going to you with Handmaidens. I should have given these to Sam because once upon a time they were his love. But sorry, Matt, you're going first, and then when Sam will talk about them.
More like the Sam Maidens.
I played a lot of Handmaidens when I was trying to get my like Kenobi Plo thing working, and like they used to be one of the better Republic supports, and like now they're just bad. It breaks my heart. They're fine. Their attacks can hit hard, but they're just they move fast. They have a lot of verticality. They have some cool stuff, but they're keyed around the like Naboo, like Handmaiden, stuff a little bit more than you would like. Coordinated fire disarm is fine, but it's probably the worst coordinated fire of a condition that you can have. I think they're D tier just because there's so much competition for them in Republic, but I do think that if Padme got a buff, you would play them, right? Because Sabe's solid. The problem is that they're within a sub-faction that just isn't very good right now because the primary is bad. And there are better options. The clone trooper synergy is better. I would probably rank them below Tekko for what it's worth.
I think it was pretty spot on.
It's sad. Sabe is great. Scott?
I second where Matt, and I think they had put them in the perfect spot.
Yeah, I agree there. I'm going to follow up with Night Sisters, and I honestly kind of think they're probably in the exact same spot. If we could do stuff with Mama T, Night Sisters might be interesting. If we could do stuff with yada yada, Night Sisters might be interesting. But right now, they might even be lower. I don't know why Night Sisters and Handmaidens feel like the exact same figure, but have you ever seen them both on the table at the same time? No, you haven't. See, that's proof.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Night Sisters are kind of like old ARFs, except that they're around a super niche tag instead of like a major faction tag. And that's a big deal. They still have coordinated fire expose, and they're allowed to have it because they're bad and because their faction is bad, and they should feel bad. Even if we got with the new Night Sister stuff, the new Dathomirian stuff that's coming out, if we got a thing that was like, hey, all your Dathomirians have protection, or all your Dathomirians have like more health, and there's just more good ones. Like if there's some real bangers in there, I could see them seeing play, but it would have to be a pretty crazy buff by addition for them to see play without getting buffs themselves.
Yep, I'm right on board. Matt, we're going to keep you going with Rebel Commandos. I mean, sorry, not Rebel Commandos, Rangers.
Yeah,
Remember?
Rangers.
Rangers, everyone.
Yeah, Alliance Rangers. I think they are maybe the best support in the game. They have infiltrate. Their attacks are phenomenal. They're going to kill you. Their defense is trash, but it doesn't matter because they've already killed you. They are the workhorse support. If you're playing Rebels, you're playing them. They are in exactly the spot that ARFs used to be, which is like, where do you put your commandos is one of the most important decisions you make in your Rebel lists. They're great.
Yeah, no comment. S tier. They're great.
Yeah. Scott, any dissent?
Yeah, these guys suck. I would never run them.
I've never seen Scott run them once.
I think these are a good candidate for best support in the game, right next to Baze and Chariot. No dissent at all.
Yeah, I'm completely on board. We're going to move on to their counterpart, the sort of the same, except in any respectable way, the Pathfinders. I'm taking the Pathfinders. It is interesting because you're not comparing them 1-to-1 with the Commandos, but you should compare them between the two. They're both 4 cost. They're both this sort of ranged unit who is built on killing things, and one does it and one doesn't. And the Pathfinders are the ones who don't. I think they're a C tier unit. I think they have stats that keep them out of D tier, but I also would have to dig very deep in order to see them get played. So I think they're kind of right in the middle of C tier. But yeah, again,
they're a fine Ewok, right? That's where they see play with the law gray defensive shell, and you get like coordinate fire exposed from Leia, and then all of a sudden they're fine, right? Because they have good defensive expertise, and you
Scale's
can move
great.
them like crazy with the scale. So they're a fine Ewok, which puts them in C tier. I think they're worse than Chopper, yeah, right there. That's perfect.
I played against Matt once with a weird Matt, I don't remember what it was. It was like Cassian, Charming Princess Leia.
Yeah.
With you made Pathfinders, and you're like, I'm gonna scale them up on a revenge trigger, and I'm scale, and like just some really interesting stuff you were pulling off with it. So yeah, they're kind of interesting.
Yeah, they're a totally respectable support unit in a faction that has really phenomenal support units, or middling support units that turn on a primary that's Kanan. And so it's hard to find a spot for them in Rebels often. But if other factions had access to these guys, you would play them, right? You just would.
I think that's a great observation. That at some point numbers games pop in where you have 6, 7, 8 figures, and eventually fine is going to fall a little bit further down.
If these guys had the Separatist tag, they would be in every Separatist list. You would just play them, right?
Yes. Speaking of, well, different tag, but era tag issues, Scott, talk to us about the ESTs.
Buddy, yeah. So the ESTs on paper are super solid. There was an argument. I mean, there was a time when people were arguing the ESTs were on par. I mean, they were wrong with ISS. They're super wrong. But the kit itself is not bad. It's just that they are super limited in where they can go. And, you know, I see people listing, like, oh, I'm working ESTs here and trying to find a place for them. I just don't think one really exists. There is a hypothetical part of me that puts them at the bottom of C tier. I think that they are probably in a Magna. I think if IG-11 is in C tier, then they can be in C tier. But I also think that I could see myself running Magnas or Tech and Echo just as likely as I see myself running ESTs, even though I think their kit is better than Tech and Echo's.
Here's what's wild is their kit is almost identical to 212. Their stance card is the same. They both have Sharpshooter 1. Oh, no, these guys have one more die on their range attacks than 212s do. And they have their force dash ability, their active ability that moves them, gives them a focus. But the problem is, I actually think if these guys were in the Galactic Civil War era, that you would see them in Empire all the time. But the problem is that the era locking just really forces weird list building constraints in other places. I also think that like 212 have coordinated fire pin, which is phenomenal. Whereas the supporting fire for Hunker or Recover are fine, but they're not doing that same kind of work there.
Yeah, I think C tier is good here. I think they immediately jump to the top of B tier if they got an era expansion.
100%.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, 100, everyone. Good job. Speaking of 100, let's talk about Snowtroopers. And by 100, I mean they're bad.
The opposite of
I
that.
Remember?
Yeah.
Matt, I have you talking about Snowtroopers. Kick it.
They're bad. Like they're D tier. They are in a faction that would really like a phenomenal 3-cost support. They are just terrible. Their shove's not till 3. Their expertise is bad. They have 8 health. They have some like thematic abilities. They have the sharpshooter thing from the Imperial Stormtroopers. They have some stuff on there that's there because they're troopers and they're stormtroopers, but they don't have a coherent kit. And so they're just bad.
Are they the worst in the game?
They are the worst in the game. I don't know why
so.
you put them there. They are explicitly the very worst unit in the entire.
I think the Ewoks might give them a run for their money, but
yeah, maybe. But Matt, look at their expertise.
I think the other unit that contends for worst in the game with them is Snowtrooper Lieutenant.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right. So also let's consider this. They have 8 health, and you think that's amazing. Until you recognize that 2 of their abilities do self-inflicted damage.
It is really funny to me that like the one time that we see in a Star Wars movie that like Empire ground forces like are actually victorious is on Hoth, and they are like by far the worst units that in the game. Like not even just
horrific.
Yep. And to be fair, I threw them there because I knew the discussion would pull them down further. I was waiting for the for the
You were
outrage.
baiting me.
I was clickbait, yep, and it worked. Yeah, they're so bad. It's weird when I have come to expect typically very good things from AMG, and I think as a whole they do great things. And every once in a while I just go, where along the testing line did they miss or did we miss? And whew, boy, are those things bad. Okay, next up we have what? Clone Commandos. Scott,
Clone Commando.
Clone Commando it up.
Yeah, so the Clone Commandos are really interesting. So with the Clone Commandos, they obviously got a buff, but that buff didn't really take them up into the stratosphere. I think they have very niche positioning. I think Matt makes a really strong argument for coordinated fire damage affecting a lot of breakpoints in like Obi Mace. I think
To be clear,
that if Obi Mace were
that's Red Mando's argument, and I just stole it. So credit to Red Mando's on that. But yeah,
credit to Red Mando. I'm sorry, Red Mando. Matt is a plagiarist and a grave robber, and he probably punches puppies too. Anyway, Clone Commando, great point. This is of it. They have protection, which is great. They get it buffed up to 8 health, or are they still at 7?
they're 7, but it's functional 8 because they have steadfast protection.
Yeah, so it's a little tough there. Obviously, there's some other shenanigans that can kind of help them out there. Mace, giving them a little bit of steadfast. I think that they have a place. They're definitely there. I would kind of put them on the same par as ISBs. So I think they are a C tier unit, have a very particular niche space. I think the Republic doesn't have the best supports just in the game, but there is a lot of competition for solid supports, and they are a niche support that works in a very specific context, but they do work.
I'm going to quibble with it. I think they belong in low B. One, I agree with all the things that Scott has said for the most part. I think that they are I think scale is phenomenal. Scale is a really good ability, particularly when it comes to out of activation mobility. I think that they are the best support to play with General Kenobi, who is one of our top 5 primaries in the game. I think you just put them under him in 90+% of the time, if not more. I also think that there are some really compelling reasons to run them in some of the Delta Hunter shells, because they give you some verticality, they give you some defensive durability. Their attacks can be really, really middling, but if you're getting bonus dice from Fixer, if you're getting dice fixing from Hunter, they can actually start to hit pretty hard. I think there are multiple contexts in Republic where you would pick them over the other 4 cost support options. I don't think they're a clear winner, but I think it's enough to put them into B tier for me.
Sam, break that tie.
I also have them in B tier. I think that they're really quite an interesting unit in all the places that Matt said. I agree with that analysis.
Yeah, they're a unit that I get. I feel like I never run into them, either play them or play against them, and they're always kind of.
They were all over Nova.
It makes sense. I'm here. Okay, we're moving on. We're going to another set of troopers. These are shore troopers, and we're going back to Sam to talk about shore troopers.
So I think I'm higher on shore troopers in the general community. I just find whenever I play against them, I find them to be an absolute pain and to do good things into me. So I have them in B tier. I think that they're just 2 bodies with protection steadfast is just really, really good. You have to put a fair amount of resources into displacing 2 of them, and I think that their dice list, while being situational, is also just a really nice thing to have on a 2-body support. It's a legit bonus that when it comes up, it's quite good. So I have them near the bottom of B tier. I think they're right by. I'd probably put them right at the bottom of B tier, but I think that they are a slept-on unit that just isn't seeing enough play.
Scott, you've run them a couple times. I've run them against you.
Yeah, I really like shore troopers. I think Sam's got them in a really good position. I think the main problem I have with them is that they are not fully actuated unless they are under Krennic or Veers, I think. Because I think he can also... Just the idea that, they obviously get bonus dice for attacking not on their activation. And there is no one in the game that can trigger that other than those 2 primaries for them. I think protection and steadfast when contesting an objective is amazing. I think it's really good. I think it plays into Stormtrooper synergy. One list that I thought was a lot of fun was V2 Krennic. I love running Stormtrooper Sergeant, Death Trooper Specialist, Death Troopers, and Stormtroopers, and just having all these extra dice. And so I really like them. I think that if they got that extra dice from something else, that wasn't specific primaries, or they had some other, if they had an ability kind of like 7 sports, like Rule 17, and they got to add the die then I think, oh boy, you got a stew going. You could put them all the way up to maybe A tier even. But I think Sam's got them in the right position. I think you maybe could put them above Clone Commandos, but I also think you could easily have them where they are right now.
Yeah, I think that they're a really solid support that is in a faction that has a lot of better supports, but they do lots of great work. I like them in B tier.
Yeah, I am on board here. Playing against them the handful of times felt like there was never a point where they didn't do what they needed to do, and yeah, I think this is a great place for them. Sam, you are given a gift here to talk about Weakways, who is your flavor of the, I don't know, whatever it is. You love the new Weakways. Walk us through it.
I think these guys are incredible. I have them right underneath Fifth Brother ahead of Coverts. I think that they have a really good tree. They have 9 health and steadfast with climb on defensive expertise and can climb when engaged. Some really wonky stuff going on there. If you are playing a scoundrel list, this is the go-to. And if you're not playing a scoundrel list and you just need a 4 that slots in regardless of synergy, you play these guys. They're mobile, they're efficient, they have a good tree, just a super solid unit.
See, I have them just lower than this, and I will defer a little bit, but my issue with them is they don't have a ton of lists that they go in per se, but I'm with you, Sam, and everything. I'm not actually going to pull them down unless Scott and Matt have a big qualm about that. They're one of those units that, yes, they're really good. Where do they go? And you don't always have the answer for that. You kind of have to search for it a little bit. And maybe the issue isn't them. That's a me issue, where I should be saying, yeah, this should be a Weakway spot versus, well, yeah, Weakways exist.
Yeah, the meta answer of where they go now is Rift Damson. They are his best friend.
Yeah, I actually do want to run them under Riff and see how that plays out.
I played against it. They were okay. I mean, Priest is a great player who was playing them. They activated once. They didn't blow me away, but they weren't terrible.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, these guys feel like a really great payoff for a list that doesn't exist yet. And again, if we got a really great 8 or 9 cost scoundrel focused primary, like I think we get a lot of pieces coming together. I agree that like you could use them in their spots for them, but like right now the metagame is so focused on like the synergy tags and the big factions that assembling a pile of good stuff is just not quite there yet. This is good stuff, and I wholeheartedly agree they belong in A tier, but I just think that the pieces for their list are not here yet.
Yeah, I think they shouldn't be as high up as they are in A tier, but I think they should be in A tier in the basis that just having 9 health and steadfast is a pretty hard thing to overcome, just generally with a support. It takes the math, I think, from an average of 2 attacks to wound to 3. Matt will have to check me on that, because I know he's been running a lot of those numbers. And I also think that they have super solid expertise. 1 to 2 for 2 hits is just, it's consistent value. Their defense is horrible, but I also think that damage push on 1 step, 2 damage on the 2nd step is super consistent. I would never argue for them out of A tier, but I would probably put them above Dark Troopers, honestly. Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Yeah. I'm perfectly fine in this, and I really wasn't going to argue with Sam basically at all, because there are a few times where Sam puts his hand down and says, this is a thing, and it's best to just listen and get good with them instead of fight. And this was one of those that I was like, yeah, this is a thing where I need to figure out how I'm going to use them and not figure out why he's. Next up, we're going to talk about wing guards, going the other way of a figure that exists. Honestly, these guys seem very low C tier. I can see places where you could use them. Don't, but I'm not opposed to people using them. They are the epitome of 3 cost fine units. They remind me of ISBs, but I think they're a little bit worse because this is going to be kind of hard to explain, but it's not that hard to explain. They fall into the rebel side of things, and rebels don't really have a need for 3 cost supports as much. And so I just see them tumbling down. That's why I have them in the low end of C and I don't know, maybe even high end of D. But I am also I don't run them a ton, and so I don't have excessive knowledge about them. Matt, give me your thoughts on wing guards.
I mean, 8 health of steadfast is great. And that's the reason why you bring them. But I think they belong right in the neighborhood of Phil's because they have a similar problem to Phil's, which is they have one icon on the first step of their tree. And that causes a lot of problems in terms of just your overall numbers output. They're fine. I also think that they don't really have a home right now because Lando is struggling to find a home, and Rebel supports are really competitive. And so are Empire supports. And so they're in the Civil War era. What do you do there?
Exact. That's my general feel. Sam, any pushback on that?
No, I think this is a good spot for them. I've played them occasionally. I considered them briefly in my Nova list. They have some niche utility and some interesting spots, but they aren't making the meta or anything.
Yeah, that's my general feel on it all. Scott, let's go to the icon, the OG, the Stormtrooper.
The Stormtroopers, gosh. So one thing I should also say about Stormtroopers is they are the upgraded version of Stormtroopers. And they are kind of everything that Stormtroopers probably should have been. Because they both have the same diceless ability, which is a terrible diceless ability, but it's something. I've never seen it used. I've never had an opportunity to use it or it was worth it, but it does exist. So I like the Stormtroopers in some areas. I like that they have 9 health. They take damage to focus, which is kind of a thematic thing from the Empire. I don't really think it makes sense from the Stormtroopers. I think it makes sense from like Inquisitors, like anger, hatred, whatever. But, having 9 health makes that a lot better proposition than, having 8 health. They have access to focus through it, and they have Sharpshooter 1, so that's nice. So they only have base 5 dice. I would love to see have them base 6 or 7 dice, considering their tree and expertise are horrible. 1 damage on step 1, another damage and strain, or 2 heals, which, what are you going to heal? You're going to get wounded pretty quickly anyway. Terrible, absolute horrible offensive expertise. Pin on 1 expertise. I was shocked when they didn't get buff in the buff cycle. I was like, guys, as you put the poster boy, the most iconic troop armor maybe ever created in media, and you're going to just kind of leave these guys by the wayside. They are a D tier unit. They have no place. I would probably put them below Del Mico, above the Ewok Trappers. Is the Trappers the guys with the spear?
Yep.
Yeah, I think there is no reason for you to ever run these guys. They need a buff.
Yeah. I had an argument of them being a little higher, but there's a certain point where quibbling they're bad. I saw them like twice, and both times they did their thing, and it was nothing. Their thing was not do anything, which, if you think about it, is fairly thematic.
These guys really read to me like AMG was saying, hey, we want to do something a little bit different for a support. The Stormtrooper is iconic. They should have an iconic, unique thing they do as supports. And it was way overtuned in testing. And so they slowly added restrictions until it kind of no longer became something where they can provide much value. I think that if For the Empire was free instead of costing the Force, or maybe if it was just an action, maybe they don't even take Exposed, suddenly I think they're a really interesting support. I love the idea. This is a high health support that has diceless displacement, and their attacks are kind of bad, but they can recover health, and they're kind of fast. I think that's a really cool niche, but I just think the specific way that they're tuned is just off base. And they just need another look, because if there's any support in the game that you want to be omnipresent on tables in games, in events, you want it to be Stormtroopers. It's Star Wars, right?
It's like you want Luke and Vader to be, important, good figures. And I think Shatterpoint's got Vader in an okay space, but poor Luke. Poor Luke.
Yeah. All right, this is our last of the pre-release drops that we'll talk about in just a second. But Z is for Zebulon. And Sam, talk about the 6th Spectre.
Yeah, so Zeb is in a weird spot. Honestly, it's probably the exact same spot that he was in before. I think he's still C tier, because every time I'm building for Spectre, I'm now often thinking I probably want Zeb over Chopper, especially in the Jin era. Like, if you're playing like a Callus Jin list, a Kanan Jin list, which I'm looking at, I think Zeb's probably just really good there, because his problem versus Chopper has always been he spends 1 million force on his turn. So I think that he's really interesting with Jin there. I think he's in a slightly better meta spot than Chopper right now. And yeah, that's where I have him, kind of around that area.
That's my general thoughts on what Zeb is. He is a guy with a lot of cool things, and ultimately is just kind of fine. Matt?
Yeah, I agree with this. I think the other interesting meta consideration is that we're seeing a lot less Hera than we used to. and Zeb's had some redundancy with Hera in terms of like the kind of value he was providing to your list. And so now that like Spectre stuff is looking at blending with Rogue One stuff as opposed to being like a true Kanan core, I think Zeb stock is up a little bit, but not a lot.
All right. So that is the 99 tier list. Now we're going to go into the three new most recent ones. The first one is Baze and Chirrut. This is not hard. They're an S tier unit. They might not be. There's argument that they're among the best unit in the game. They have everything you could possibly want, more or less. They are just so good. Like so good that we are arguing that Han and Chewie are B tier units. And I know that kind of sounds funny, but that's how good they are. I know that they're probably not the best unit in the game. And we could probably switch
they're up
where
there.
they're there. Yeah.
Yeah, Base and Chirrut might be the best unit in the game. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. I think they're the best.
I think the thing that's interesting to me about Baze and Chirrut, and I think I would put them above Rebel Commandos. I think the thing is that Rebel Commandos only cost 4, and so Baze and Chirrut obviously are going to have a better kit, but they also cost more, right? I think they are what a 5 cost support should be in just terms of power. I don't think they're broken, but they are maybe approaching that. I think the thing that sets them apart, so I actually think they are hard to pilot. I think that having to manage the hard switches, having to navigate the different abilities can be a lot to manage. So I think it's something that, if you put them down and you've never played them before, there might be some stumbling blocks. But I think the thing that puts them so high up for me is just the fact that they will never, ever be a liability for you. They are not like the best damage dealers, but they are really good at holding points. They are really good at pushing people off. They are mobile, and their force recovery is stupid. They are great in low force cost lists because, hey, you can wound them till the cows come home. They will never cost more force than you have to spend, ever. The only situation is if, you refresh all of your force and you're starting completely from scratch, which is like, what a terrible problem to have, am I right? So I think that just in and of itself, it's just like the consistency they offer. I think, Sam, I'll need to think about it, but I'm probably with you that I think they're currently the best single unit in the game. I think they're definitely the best support.
What's funny to me is if you had told me a year ago that Rebels were going to have a 5 cost support with a unique name and nothing else, I would have been like, man, that just creates more problems than it solves. But the base level fact that one Bodhi is so good, and so you can just plop them with Bodhi under any 8 cost Rebel primary that you want. And more importantly, Cassian is 9. And so you can just plop them under Cassian, and they have so much direct synergy with Cassian, who is the most played primary in the metagame right now. He is the primary that you have to consider the most. He's winning all the stuff. I think we may have underrated Cassian in our primary tier list based on where the metagame has developed since then. Well, yeah, I think that tracks for me.
Yeah, my biggest issue of are they the best unit of the game is that I really didn't think about it before I started talking, and then I went, yeah, they're probably... You've moved from, like, our A-tier list is, if you're inside the faction, you have to think of a reason not to run them. Baze and Chirrut right now, I think you have to think of a reason to run not this faction to not run them. Like, what is so overwhelmingly good in a different faction to get away from them? And there are answers, but that's right now where Baze and Chirrut is, and it's just every time I see them, every time I go up against them, every time they are played, their worst activation is still like, oh, I'm going to refresh force, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to flip a marker if I really choose to, oh, and I'm going to do 1 billion damage, and that's it. Oh, and also I'm going to get Shatterpointed every time because I'm under Cassian, and I'm going to roll 11 dice and also just kill everything again because that's what I do. Anyway, turns out we think he's good. We are moving on to people we don't have any pictures for. We're going to talk about first the Aqua Droids. Sam, you ran into a few Aqua Droids, I think, at Nova, or in your testing. Talk to us. Give us your general Aqua Droid opinion.
They're fine. They're definitely under the curve for what other 5 costs do, but at the same point, they are playable. Their ranged attacks are awful. Their melee attacks feel like a 5 cost. And so that's really the dichotomy of it all. I do like that the crit mitigation in their defensive expertise, that is something that is good. I'd put them in C tier, near top end, probably just under Padawans, which would be 3rd in our C tier right now. Here is where I would put them. But I think they're perfectly playable, but not like amazing.
Scott, you've also ran into a few at Evergreen.
Yeah, I played. Yeah, at Evergreen, I played against again the really interesting list that Chris Pierce was running with Rift and Mando, and gosh, Mando was just I'd wound something and because I had Cat Cassian, and he just would heal the Aquador. I just could not get to 8 health and protection is really difficult for the Cat Cassian list. My max damage in a lot of cases is 8, and so it's like oh, crap. So I was impressed with the Aqua Droids in that I thought they were going to be worse, and I thought they were fine. I agree. I think for a 5 cost that they are lacking. So I would probably put them somewhere in B tiers is kind of my thought. Not towards the top, but not towards the bottom. I think I think they have a spot, and I think they'll see play, but they're not base material.
Yep. Matt?
I agree. I mean, I think the like full aquatic list is interesting. And yes, it turns out like we've learned with Boosh that like having bad expertise is fine if you can just like add a million dice. And so there are some fun things there. I was a little bit more optimistic about these guys when they were spoiled. And I think that the reality is they're one of the newest in a wave of a lot of 5 cost supports. And they're just kind of underwhelming compared to the quality of the other 5 cost supports that are out there for a faction that like has some weird cost restraints because it's like they feel like they're kind of stable to Nasser in order to do stuff, which kind of means they're stable to Riff as well. And then you get into some other weird stuff where it's like you would really like to have a 3-cost secondary to run under Dooku, but then you have to put Aqua Droids in the other squad, and then your points are weird. And so like there's just a lot of weird things for them just because there are not a ton of like options in Separatists. I think they could be better, but I think they're kind of middling right now.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen them on the table yet. Obviously they're 3 weeks old or something along those lines. But my general sense is a little higher than Sam's, but Sam has also run against them, and so I'll trust his. But I've also, Scott's artist, so I would
Scott's
I
played
would have
against
them
them.
low in B.
I'm willing to
Yeah.
put them in B. I think I could be just being a little low on them.
Yeah, and but at the same time, they're the best Separatist support,
Yes.
which is saying nothing at all, I think. But lower B, upper C is probably the same general idea. Scott and Sam both seeing them, and it's probably that they have niches that maybe Sam ran into that Scott didn't, and vice versa. So it's okay. I think that's where they are. I think that's where they'll stay. And if Riff takes off, which he is getting played like crazy, then they're going to go along with it. And we're going to get to our last one, and that is Sev and Scorch. We obviously didn't have Delta in our previous 2, just like we didn't have Riff. Scott, talk to us about the little firepower at the back end of Delta.
Yeah. So Delta is a really interesting box. And, there are people with a lot of different things. I think it is strong the entire way throughout the kit. I think that there are some piloting things you got to figure out with boss, but the consistent feedback you get outside of that is like Fixer is really impactful, and 7 Scorts are kind of the breakout stars. And so for me, what I think is so impactful about them is they have a very low force requirement to do basically what anything does, and then you are totally fine to spend force when you need it for their extra really cool abilities. They get that free dash towards an enemy character, which is just nice, especially, in a really low force list. They have the ability to blow someone up, if you need like that 1 or 2 extra damage. You're rolling 5 dice and getting for your expertise, honestly, on average, you're probably only get 1 or 2 damage, but you're also giving out a strain. That can be the break point in a lot of ways. And then, when someone's attacking, within 3 of them, and then they can follow up with an attack, it makes them super consistent, super powerful. They've got really good expertise. They've got solid defense. They have access to protection and steadfast. They are benefiting both from Fixer's ability and contributing to Fixer's ability. So in that context of that, you can, Sam's had a really awesome list. We ran them outside of Delta's context, I think with Cam and Pawn. So they work outside of that context. Even though they have that synergy, they still are really good on their own. I know some people are lower on them than we are. They have kind of said, hey, once they're wounded, things really go downhill. I don't really agree with that. I get it because, those abilities can be expensive, but I also think Boss has a force refresh, and I think that they are really good even if they don't spend force on their turn. So it's not a huge deal in my mind. So I think they are an S tier unit right below Commandos. I think that you could probably argue they aren't S tier, but I think if you argue them as A tier, they are at the top of A tier, definitely above Fifth Brother. I think they are really good.
Yeah, I might rate
I
them
agree.
above Commandos, but I think right below Commandos and S tier is totally respectable. I think they're really solid there, very clearly. I think I said on our secondary tier list that like my defensive pawns that hey, if Republic were to get a real banger of a like 4 cost or a 5 cost support, suddenly like pawns starts to get really scary. And I think we've seen Sam doing stuff with that. I think the whole Delta squad is just really, really great. This was a much smaller and a much less competitive event than, you know, Nova or Evergreen or some of the others that have, you know, shown up big recently. But in our local Utah Cup, we had Delta Squad Boss was the most played primary across 11 games. And it's because there were 3 of the 9 players in that event brought Delta Squad. And all 3 of those players, including myself, played Delta in every game that they could. Every game but one, they played Delta. And on that day, Delta Squad in general lost 4 games, and 3 of them were in mirrors. And then 1 was against a Dooku Asajj list. And I think 7 Scorch are by far the workhorse in the list. They're your Shatterpoint target. 8 health with protection steadfast is just phenomenal. They're, especially with Fixer on the table, they're regularly getting 3 steps. And on 3 steps, you get 4 damage, strain, shove. And so if you do that twice, you're killing 9 health units in 1 combat action, which is phenomenal. If you need to shove, they can shove. They also have an activated ability that does damage. So if you just fall short of the breakpoint, you can secure the wound anyway. They're just great. I think if you're playing Republic, 7 Scorch are the reason to play Republic right now.
Sam, any other thoughts?
No, I think those guys covered it great. They're definitely an S tier.
Yep, I agree. If there is a reason why they are an A tier unit, I think that's not true. I think Delta as a squad can be hard to pilot. They're not as simple as you think. They are not a rolling ball of knives where you roll downhill. They are very tactical, and you need to protect, and you need to do smart things. But that is Boss and Fixer, and that is not 7 Scorch. 7 Scorch kill things, and they do it very well, and they move wherever they want to go, and they are your Shatterpoint targets, and they are, when you get a chance to do them, you do whatever you want with them every time. And again, yeah, I don't think they cost much force, and I don't have much more to say. Matt, any final?
This is just kind of a final jab at the Ewok Trappers, which I think is funny. I was thinking about this. So their trap card, which was like the premier thing on their list, Boss basically has that as an active ability that costs 2 force, except he gets more stuff out of it. And also because you can Shatterpoint Boss, you can use it more than once per shuffle, and you get to know like what happens. So it's kind of interesting to think about that as a re-implementation and why are the Ewoks struggling so much compared to a different version of that. It's really great. But yeah, I think I really like where we've landed with our tier list overall. I'm kind of surprised that C tier is our biggest tier, but I think that makes sense for supports because the field of supports in general have a lot of really, really great options and then a lot of niche to just don't play these. I think this is the most D tier units we've had in any of our tier lists.
Yeah. While you're on, anything you want to slide up or down, Matt, and then we'll walk through the run.
I think the closest thing that I might have is moving ISF's Padawans and Soups up to B tier, kind of changing where that breakpoint between B and C is. I think it's like there's not that much distance between the bottom of B tier and the top of C tier. For me, you know, that feels very, you know, all of it's subjective, but it feels especially subjective. But otherwise, I don't have any like super strong disagreements here.
Sam, going over to you, any changes? Any thoughts on the C tier slide up?
I think that's fine. I wouldn't move Soups up, but I'd be fine moving the other 2 up. I just think Soups are in a pretty bad spot right now. Whereas the other 2, it's kind of broken down of S tier, very, very, very best. Those are your in faction. You're going to take these. B, they see a solid amount of play, and C, a rare amount of play, and D, just don't play. Yeah, I think this is fine.
Scott, what about you? Anything you want to move up and down? Last minute jabs at Matt?
No, I like it. I'm fine with it.
Yep. Yeah, I feel good with where we landed. There are a few surprises of where things ended up, mostly Han and Chewie but again, I think it speaks more to the flux, that influx of 5 costs at the end in these last 3 months, and which is totally fine. S tier is like you're bringing these, and you may switch to Rebels just to bring these, or you may switch to Republic just to bring these. A tier is like if you're running these, you should be running these. I will say Fifth Brother might be a touch high just because one body problems, but I'm not actually going to fight the fight. Um, I don't want to go into it too much because I don't disagree with where he is. But yeah, if you're running them, you're probably running those people. B tier is like realistically, if you have the question of what am I running instead, these are the things you're running instead. These are the answers to that question of is it something else? And then C and D. C is a lot of perfectly fine stuff in a world where perfectly fine isn't good enough. And D's bad. It's bad. But I feel good about this. I feel like we've learned and loved and we've grown together as a community. Anyway, this is a lot shorter of an episode in all the best ways. And we appreciate you. We appreciate sitting through what is going to end up being 8 hours of tier lists, which is 3 and 3 and 2. I don't know if the other ones actually ended up being 6, but it was pretty close. And again, we love you. It's the smart way to go. Okay, thank you all. We appreciate your love and support. We will see you all. We are a month out. By the time this comes out, we're going to be a month out from the Utah Sci-Fi Invi GT. That is going to be a blast. We are at 48 people on the dot. I think we have 49. One person's waiting. We would love to see you, and we are going to be excited to run all these ST figures and hopefully have no one else beat us. And in the meantime, much love, rate and view, join the Slack, and everyone say bye.
Bye.
See you,
Bye.
bye.